Hi, welcome to Ask Tim, the insurance technical podcast brought to you by IIABNY. I'm your host, Tim Dodge, and I'm coming to you today from the supercomputer lab here in the Geek Cave at IIABNY headquarters, where I use state-of-the-art equipment to answer your research questions. All right, actually, this is a keyboard that doesn't work anymore because I spilled a drink on it, and I had to go beg the IT department for a new one, and it's really just kind of in my way, so get rid of that. Listen, I want to talk to you today about a really important subject. It's something that's getting more attention, it seems like, every day, and that's cyber liability insurance. I just want to tell you a couple stories about that. In April of this year, and I'm talking right now, speaking in the fall of 2011, in April of this year, the Sony Playstation Network announced that it had been hacked. As many as 77 million users of the Sony PlayStation Network had their names, their addresses, and possibly their credit card numbers exposed to hackers. It was a disaster for Sony, one that they're still trying to recover from. On a more personal level, about 7 years or so ago, when my kids were younger, I took my two younger boys to see the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. And if you saw that movie, you know that there was a secret message written on the back of the original Declaration of Independence, and the movie revolved around that. My boys enjoyed that so much that they made up fake copies of the Declaration of Independence and were, playing, reenacting the movie. And so we thought it'd be cool to get them, not just the Declaration of Independence, but a copy of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution for Christmas, because every 9-year-old looks for copies of our nation's most sacred documents under the Christmas tree on Christmas morning. So we sent away to the U.S. Park Service, and they came, and we gave the boys the documents for Christmas, and they had a blast, and everything was cool. And then sometime a few months later, we got a letter from the Parks Department saying, our systems were hacked, and it's possible that your data was taken. Just wanted to let you know. So I speak from personal experience that that's not a fun letter to get in the mail, and I'll bet you if you're an organization that has to send it, that's not a real pleasant experience either. Now here's the problem. Data breaches cost a lot of money. In a survey of the data from the year 2010, the least expensive data breach in that survey cost about $750,000. The most expensive one cost $31 million. Now hopefully neither you nor your insurers are ever going to have a loss value that high, but it's certainly an exposure to take seriously. And here's the other problem. Commercial general liability policies, commercial property policies, and commercial theft policies don't cover these sorts of events. Why? Because they cover loss of tangible property, things that you can touch and feel, like that keyboard that I just threw. It doesn't cover loss of electronic data, which is intangible. The CGL policies and the property policies specifically say they don't cover intangible property. So this is a real problem. And so what has happened, what's come into the breach there, is that you've got around 30 or so markets now offering special cyber liability insurance policies, or cyber insurance policies, because some of them provide property coverage as well. So these are claims-made forms for the liability coverage, and some may cover your loss of data if someone breaks into your system and corrupts your data or plants a virus or something like that, and so you lose data that way, or if your data is stolen. But probably the more significant coverage that people think about with this is the liability coverage. This coverage has really taken off. In 2010, the estimate was that the annual gross written premium was around $800 million. That was up $200 million from a couple of years earlier, and is probably going to surpass $1 billion either this year or next year. So it's a big market. And so I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about the things you should look for when you're evaluating a cyber liability insurance policy, either for you or for your insureds. You want to pay attention to the types of coverage and the limits that are available. And when we talk about things like remediation, those limits could be really significant. So you want to look and see, is it providing just liability coverage? Is it liability and property? And how much coverage is being provided? Obviously, how much the limits are. When it comes to the liability coverage, we're really talking about three main areas. We're talking about liability for failure to protect private data. We're talking about remediation costs, and those are things like the cost of investigating the incident, notifying customers that this has happened, monitoring customers' credit records for them after the incident to make sure that they're not being exposed to identity theft. And then there's some coverage for fines and penalties assessed by regulators. Typically, insurance policies will cover the defense cost, the cost of defending the insured in the investigation by the regulator. Won't necessarily cover the cost of the fines and penalties themselves. That is something that probably the insured is going to have to bear on their own. You want to look at what the coverage triggers are, and they could be a failure to secure data, which is what you ordinarily think of with a cyber liability incident. It could be a loss caused by an employee, either deliberately or accidentally through carelessness. It could be an act committed by somebody who's not insured, somebody from outside the company who hacks in or who visits your office. And it could be loss of personal property that has data on it. Think of the laptop that gets stolen at the airport or a hard drive that disappears from the IT department. So those sorts of incidents could trigger coverage under many of the policies that are available. The types of data covered, that would be individuals' personally identifiable information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, dates of birth, things like that. It could be non-public data, non-public corporate data we're talking about, trade secrets, proprietary information, spreadsheets, that kind of thing. And it could be, curiously enough, non-electronic data kept on printouts, data kept in books, and all sorts of private information kept that way. So it may cover not just the electronic data, which is what you think about with cyber liability, but it could refer to printed data as well. Some policies may have a built-in package of remediation services that the insured can use in the event of a data breach. So they contact the company, we've had a breach, and the company will take over the things like notifying customers and activating the credit monitoring and that kind of thing. These forms, as I mentioned, are all written on a claims-made basis, so you want to pay attention to the extended reporting period provisions. You want to pay attention to the deductibles that might apply, because like your own insurance agent's E&O policies, these are liability policies are going to come with some kind of a retention to give the insured an incentive to control losses. These policies, like a lot of professional liability policies, may include a hammer clause, where the insured doesn't necessarily have to agree to a settlement proposed by the insurance company, but if the end settlement ends up being larger than what the insurance company proposed, all the insurer has to pay is the amount that they proposed, and the insured has to pay the difference. So you want to look out for hammer clauses. You want to look for any optional coverages that might be available, things like virus coverage, personal and advertising injury, which are coverages that are also available under the CGL policy, but some cyber policies may provide this as well. Copyright infringement, patent infringement, unauthorized access coverage, all sorts of extra things like that. Now, if you're an IIABNY member and you're interested in buying this sort of coverage for your own agency, this is something that we can provide to you through our Member Services Division IAC. And the person you want to talk to here is Brian Bixby, who you can contact at 800-851-8853, extension 233, or by email at bbixby@iabny.org. If you need to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email at tdodge@iabny.org, by phone at 800-851-8853, extension 229. You can find me on Twitter as Ask Tim. You can send me a fax at 888-432-0510. You can sometimes find me on AOL Instant Messenger as tdog4494. And if you ever see me out and about teaching a class, or if you're at some IIABNY event, please feel free to come up and say hi and ask me a question if you've got one. Thanks for watching this episode of Ask Tim. We'll be back again soon with another episode. And in the meantime, if you want information and help and guidance on how to break computer equipment, don't forget to Ask Tim.